Restaurant manager dragged black shy waitress to bathroom. Unaware Mafia boss was standing nearby. His hand gripped her wrist so tight she thought her bones would snap. The clatter of dishes froze midair as every server in the restaurant turned toward the commotion. The manager's voice tore through the quiet like thunder, echoing off the marble walls. He dragged her toward the hallway that led to the bathrooms, his words sharp enough to slice through the stunned silence. Everyone watched, but no one dared to move. No one except the man sitting in the far corner, his glass of red wine motionless in his hand, his eyes narrowing with cold precision. Where are you watching from? What time is it in your city right now? Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe, because what happens next will make your jaw drop. Stay tuned. This is only getting started. The waitress stumbled, her name barely escaping someone's whisper, Lena. She was new, barely 2 weeks into the job, quiet as a whisper, the kind of girl who flinched every time someone raised their voice. The manager shoved open the bathroom door and slammed it shut behind them. His voice boomed inside, too loud for the soft music outside to hide. He accused her of dropping an order, of costing the restaurant money, of being worthless. She tried to explain, her voice trembling, saying the customer had changed the order last minute. But he wasn't listening. His anger wasn't about spilled wine or broken plates. It was about control. And right now, he wanted her to break. The man in the corner, Lorenzo DeSantis, watched the door swing shut. The moment lingered, heavy with unspoken threat. His driver, sitting at the table across from him, caught his expression and went still. Lorenzo wasn't just any customer. He was the man whose name made rival families whisper and police departments hesitate. He had walked in for dinner, a simple meeting, nothing more. But the scene unfolding before him shifted something inside. That girl, her wide, terrified eyes, that trembling silence, it reminded him of something. Someone. Inside the bathroom, Lena's breath came in short gasps. She tried to step back, but the wall caught her. The manager's shadow loomed over her, his voice dropping into something quieter, crueler. He told her no one would believe her. He said if she wanted to keep her job, she'd better learn her place. Her heart pounded so hard she thought she might faint. Her hands shook as she whispered that she just wanted to work, to keep things peaceful. But his smirk deepened, and for a second, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't just rage. It was power drunk on her fear. Lorenzo stood up. The chair legs scraped against the floor, a sharp sound that made half the restaurant turn. He didn't rush. He walked slow, deliberate, every step sending a quiet wave of tension across the room. The host stammered as he approached, trying to offer help, but one look from him was enough to silence the man mid-sentence. Lorenzo reached the hallway, his hand brushing the wall, his jaw tight. He could hear muffled crying through the door, a man's low growl, and his expression darkened. He opened the door without knocking. The manager froze mid-sentence, his hand still gripping Lena's arm. She went silent, tears streaking down her face, eyes wide at the sight of the man standing in the doorway. Lorenzo didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His presence alone filled the room like a storm rolling in. The manager stammered, releasing her arm, tried to explain that it was a misunderstanding, that he was just disciplining his staff. But Lorenzo's eyes never left him. Cold, measured, deadly. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and for a moment there was only silence. When Lorenzo finally spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that made men sweat before the bullet. He asked the manager if this was how he treated his employees. The man laughed nervously, said she'd been causing problems, that she needed to learn. Lorenzo looked at Lena, her wrist red and trembling, then back at him. Without raising his voice, he told the man to apologize. The manager hesitated, scoffed, said he didn't take orders from customers. That was the last mistake he'd ever make so casually. Lorenzo took one slow step closer. The air seemed to tighten, his tone low enough that only the three of them could hear. He said he owned half the city's kitchens, including the suppliers this restaurant depended on. The manager's color drained. Lorenzo leaned in slightly, his words slicing through the air like ice. He told him to get down on his knees and apologize to her. The man froze, looking at Lena, then at the door, realizing for the first time who he was talking to. The silence stretched, heavy as stone. Then, reluctantly, the manager dropped to his knees. His voice trembled as he whispered an apology, his eyes darting toward Lena's trembling hands. Lena stood motionless, barely believing what she was seeing. She wanted to speak, to stop it, to say she didn't want this, but her throat locked. Lorenzo finally turned to her, his voice soft now, telling her to go back out and take a seat. She hesitated, then obeyed, stepping out into the hallway where the murmuring crowd tried to pretend they hadn't heard everything. Inside, Lorenzo stayed behind. No one knew what was said next. The music from the dining area masked whatever happened, but when the door opened again, the manager didn't come out. Only Lorenzo did, adjusting his cuffs, his expression unreadable. He walked back to his table like nothing had happened, sat down, and resumed his meal. Lena sat alone at a booth, trying to catch her breath. Her hand still shook, but her eyes were different now. Fear had shifted into something else. Curiosity, confusion, gratitude tangled with disbelief. She didn't know who that man was or why he had helped her, but the way he looked at her, steady, deliberate, protective in a way she hadn't seen in years, made her heart race for reasons she didn't understand. The restaurant manager didn't return that night. The assistant manager took over, pale and silent, pretending everything was normal. The staff whispered, the customers glanced nervously at Lorenzo's table, and Lena just kept her head down, pouring wine, clearing plates, trying to stay invisible. But she could feel his gaze follow her. Not in a predatory way, but in a way that said he noticed everything. The way she moved, the way she flinched when someone brushed past, the faint bruise on her wrist she tried to hide. Later, as the restaurant emptied and the lights dimmed, Lorenzo stood at the bar waiting for his bill. She approached quietly, trying to hand him the receipt, but he stopped her with a glance. He told her she should never let anyone touch her that way again. His voice was low, almost gentle, but there was an edge to it that carried a promise. Then he slid a card toward her. Just a number. No name. Told her if anyone ever hurt her again, she should call. She didn't know whether to thank him or to run. He left without another word, his driver opening the door as he disappeared into the night. But Lena stood there long after he was gone, staring at that card, feeling a shiver crawl up her spine. She didn't know it yet, but that night had just changed everything. And by morning, her abusive boyfriend would be the one people whispered about. The one who didn't show up for work. The one who was found miles away, with his world torn apart. Lena didn't sleep that night. The city outside her apartment window pulsed with distant sirens and car horns, but inside, everything was still. She sat on the edge of her bed, clutching that small white card between her fingers like it was a piece of her fate. Just a number, neatly printed. No name, no logo, no hint of the man who'd handed it to her like a warning and a lifeline all at once. Her hands trembled. She had never met anyone like him. The way he'd looked at her, steady, unshaken, like he saw every bruise and every secret she'd been hiding, and the way the manager had vanished afterward. No one said a word, but everyone in that restaurant knew something had happened. Something no one wanted to explain. Her boyfriend, Tyler, didn't come home until after midnight. The door slammed so hard the picture frame above the couch rattled. She jumped, hiding the car behind her back. His eyes were wild, and his breath reeked of whiskey. He started shouting before he even kicked off his shoes, demanding to know why she hadn't answered his calls, why she'd been late, who she'd been talking to at work. His jealousy was like poison, slow, relentless, and unpredictable. He grabbed her phone off the counter and scrolled through her messages while she stood frozen, praying he wouldn't find the new text from her coworker asking if she was okay. When he threw the phone at the wall, she flinched but didn't scream. She'd learned that silence was safer. But then his hand reached for her, that same brutal grip she'd felt before. Something inside her cracked. Not a scream, not a sob, something colder. A quiet kind of defiance she didn't even recognize in herself. She pushed him back and told him to stop. For a moment, he froze, eyes narrowing like he couldn't believe she'd dare to speak. Then he struck her. Hard. The sound echoed through the small apartment like a gunshot. She fell against the couch, breath knocked out of her. Her cheek burned, tears spilling before she could stop them. He started pacing, shouting that she was making him crazy, that she didn't appreciate everything he did for her, that she was lucky he even stayed. But all Lena could think about was that card, the one sitting on the nightstand, the one that felt like it was staring at her even now. After he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the hinges rattled, Lena crawled to her feet and looked at herself in the mirror. Her lip was split, her eyes red, her wrists still sore from earlier. She wanted to throw the card away, burn it, pretend none of it existed. But her fingers moved on their own. She picked up her phone, entered the number, and just stared at the digits glowing on the screen. She didn't press call. Not yet. She just needed to know she could. The next morning, the restaurant buzzed with whispers. The manager's name was on everyone's lips. No one had seen him. His office door was locked, his car still in the lot, and his phone went straight to voicemail. The assistant manager took charge, nervously avoiding eye contact with anyone. Lena walked in quietly, hair pulled back to hide the mark on her cheek. She moved like a ghost, avoiding questions, pretending everything was normal. But she could feel it, the tension, the unspoken fear, the way every staff member avoided mentioning the night before. Something was wrong. By midday, a man in a suit walked in. Tall, sharp, moving like someone used to being obeyed. He didn't ask for a table. He just looked around the room until his eyes landed on her. Lena's breath caught. It wasn't Lorenzo, but she knew instantly he worked for him. The same cold, controlled presence. He approached her slowly, asked her name without raising his voice, and then said that Mr. DeSantis requested to see her. Every word was polite, but his tone carried no room for refusal. She followed him out of the restaurant, her heart hammering. The city noise felt distant, muffled under the weight of something bigger. A sleek black car waited at the curb, tinted windows gleaming under the afternoon sun. The door opened, and there he was, Lorenzo, sitting in the back seat, one arm resting casually on the door. He looked up from a file in his hand, eyes locking on hers. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then he gestured for her to get in. She slid into the seat, unsure if she should speak first. He didn't look angry, but there was something unreadable in his expression, something that made her pulse race. He asked if her boyfriend was still in the picture. The question hit like a knife. She didn't answer right away, just stared down at her hands. He sighed softly, closing the file. Told her that some men didn't know how to handle what they couldn't control. That fear made them dangerous, and that sometimes the only way to stop them was to remind them they weren't the ones in power. Her stomach tightened. She didn't want him to think she was asking for help. She wasn't. At least, that's what she told herself. But he could see the bruise, faint under her makeup. He noticed everything. He told her she didn't have to explain, that it was already being handled. The way he said it made her chest go cold. That night, Tyler didn't come home. She waited until dawn, pacing the living room, calling his phone over and over. It rang once, then silence. Her hand shook. She told herself maybe he'd gone out drinking again. Maybe he'd crashed at a friend's place. But when two detectives showed up at her door the next morning, her breath stopped. They said there'd been an incident, a body found near the docks. They needed her to identify him. The world blurred. Every step she took felt unreal, the police lights flashing against her pale face as she stood there staring at what was left of him. It was Tyler, bruised, beaten, gone. The detectives said it looked like a robbery gone wrong. She didn't believe that for a second. That evening, she sat on her couch, the card still in her hand. She wanted to cry, but nothing came out, just silence. Her phone buzzed once. A text from an unknown number. For words, "You're safe now, Lena." Her heart jumped. She deleted the message immediately, but it didn't matter. She knew who it was from. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or terrified, because part of her knew what that text really meant. He hadn't just helped her. He'd made a statement. The following days blurred together. The police kept calling, asking questions, trying to connect dots that didn't exist on paper. No suspects, no witnesses. The case stalled before it even began. But Lena could feel it, the invisible hand that had pulled the strings, the shadow that moved for her. Every night, she'd look at that card on the table, wondering if she'd crossed a line she could never step back from. Then one evening, the restaurant called. They wanted her to come back. Things had settled, they said. They needed her help. She almost said no. But something inside her, a strange mix of defiance and curiosity, made her agree. When she arrived, the place was quieter, the atmosphere heavier. The new manager greeted her nervously, eyes darting toward the corner booth. Lorenzo was there again. He didn't smile when he saw her, just nodded once, slow and deliberate. She hesitated, then walked over, her heart pounding with every step. He told her to sit, said he wanted to talk. She could feel the weight of his words before he even spoke them. He said she was working for him now, not at the restaurant, not as a waitress, but under his protection. Her breath hitched. She told him she didn't understand. He said she would, soon. And when he looked at her that way, cold, certain, dangerous, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a debt he had decided to collect. And the world she'd stumbled into was one she could never escape from again. Lena sat across from Lorenzo, her pulse thundering in her ears. His words echoed in her head like a sentence she didn't fully understand. She was under his protection now. That was what he said. But protection from what? Or from whom? The room around them felt smaller by the second, the air tight and charged. Lorenzo's gaze never left her face, as if he was studying every flicker of fear, every hesitation. He told her quietly that what had happened to Tyler was over, that she didn't need to fear him anymore. But the way he said it didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like control. He slid a small envelope across the table and told her to open it when she got home. Then, without another word, he stood and walked away, leaving her sitting there trembling, a part of her desperate to run and another part too afraid to move. That night, Lena sat at her kitchen table, staring at the envelope. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She'd told herself not to open it, that nothing good could come from anything that man gave her. But curiosity clawed at her until finally she tore it open. Inside was a stack of $100 bills and a short note written in neat handwriting. Your rent. For the next 6 months. You owe me nothing, but stay out of trouble. Her throat tightened. He had taken care of her problems, and now he was paying her bills. Gratitude battled with fear in her chest. This was the kind of help that came with invisible strings, the kind that felt safe at first until it wrapped around your neck. But she couldn't ignore the truth. She needed it. She hadn't worked since the incident. The restaurant had paid her for the week and cut her loose quietly. No one wanted that kind of attention. No one wanted to be associated with her. Except him. The next morning, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, 2 men in dark suits stood there. They weren't police. She didn't have to ask who sent them. One handed her a phone. Lorenzo's voice came through before she could even speak. He told her to get dressed. There was someone he wanted her to meet. She started to protest, saying she wasn't ready. But he cut her off with a calm finality that left no room for refusal. An hour later, she was sitting in the back of a black car, the city flashing by in streaks of light. The driver said nothing, the silence pressing down like a weight. When they stopped, she realized they were outside an expensive restaurant she'd only seen in magazines. The kind of place where people like her didn't belong. Inside, everything gleamed, crystal chandeliers, polished floors, and suits that cost more than her rent. Lorenzo was already there, seated at a private table, his expression unreadable. He stood when she entered, pulling out a chair for her. She sat down awkwardly, her eyes darting around. He told her to relax, that no one here would dare touch her. She wanted to believe him, but the way the other men at the table looked at her made her skin crawl. They were dangerous in a different way, smooth, charming, the kind of danger that hid behind smiles. Lorenzo introduced her as someone under his protection. The message was clear. She wasn't one of them, but she belonged to him. Throughout dinner, she said almost nothing, her fingers twisting in her lap. Lorenzo handled business, his voice low and controlled. Words like shipment, deal, and territory passed between them, but she didn't understand half of it. What she did understand was how the others deferred to him, how every decision stopped when he spoke. He wasn't just powerful, he was feared, and somehow she had been pulled into his orbit. After the meeting, he walked her outside. The air was cold, sharp against her skin. She finally found her voice and asked him why he was doing this. He stopped, looked at her, and said because no one had ever done it for her. Then he turned away, stepping into the car before she could respond. The door closed, and the sound of the engine faded into the night, leaving her standing alone on the curb, her mind spinning. Days turned into weeks. She tried to return to a normal life, but normal no longer existed. People whispered when she walked by. Some called her lucky, others cursed her name. She kept her head down, worked odd jobs, tried to stay invisible. But sometimes, she'd see the same black car parked across the street from her building. Watching, waiting, protecting, or controlling. She couldn't tell anymore. Then one night, everything changed again. She was walking home from the grocery store when two men stepped out from an alley. She froze. They weren't muggers. She could tell by their shoes by the way they moved. One grabbed her arm, asking if she was Lorenzo's girl. She stammered no, but they laughed, saying she should have thought about that before letting him take care of her boyfriend. Her blood turned to ice. Before she could scream, headlights flooded the alley, and a car screeched to a stop. Lorenzo's driver stepped out first, followed by two men who moved fast, efficient, silent. It was over in seconds. The men who'd grabbed her were on the ground, groaning, one of them bleeding. Lorenzo appeared a moment later, his suit immaculate, his expression colder than she'd ever seen. He told her to get in the car. She hesitated, shaking, but he repeated it, his tone leaving no room for argument. Inside, she sat trembling, clutching the seatbelt. He said nothing for a long time, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Finally, he said she was done living alone, that it was too dangerous now. She tried to argue, saying she didn't want his help, that she never asked for any of this. His hand slammed against the dashboard, the sudden sound making her jump. He turned to her, his voice low but filled with fire. He told her she was alive because of him, that the kind of men who had just come for her didn't forgive or forget. He said she had two choices: go back to her apartment and wait for the next attack, or come with him and stay safe. Her heart raced. She didn't know if it was fear or something else, something buried deeper. Finally, she whispered okay. The car drove through the city and out toward the hills until it stopped in front of a gated estate. The guards opened the gates without question, and soon she was stepping into a mansion that looked like something from a dream. Marble floors, long hallways, silence thick enough to drown in. Lorenzo led her inside, past rooms she didn't dare look into, and stopped at a door near the back. He told her this would be her room. She looked at him, tried to read his face, but his expression was carved from stone. She thanked him quietly, unsure if it was the right thing to say. He didn't respond, just said dinner was at 7 and walked away. That night, Lena lay awake staring at the ceiling. Everything felt unreal. The softness of the sheets, the hum of security cameras, the knowledge that she was living under the same roof as the man who had destroyed her old life and saved her in the same breath. She didn't know what she was anymore. A guest, a prisoner, or something in between. But somewhere deep down, beneath the fear and confusion, a dangerous thought took root. Maybe she wasn't just being protected. Maybe she was being prepared. And if that was true, then whatever Lorenzo DeSantis wanted from her, it hadn't even begun yet. Lena woke up to voices in the hallway, urgent, low, sharp. She sat up, heart pounding, the silence after each word louder than the last. Something was wrong. She slipped out of bed, pressed her ear to the door. Lorenzo's voice came through, clipped and hard. Another voice responded, trembling. She couldn't catch the words, but she caught the tone, fear. Heavy footsteps followed, then the unmistakable sound of someone being dragged away. She waited until everything went quiet again, then opened the door. The corridor was empty except for the faint smell of gun oil and smoke. Her pulse raced. She moved down the hall barefoot, every step careful. From the balcony above the living room, she saw them, Lorenzo and two of his men, standing over a man tied to a chair. His face was bloodied, his shirt torn. Lorenzo's calm was terrifying. He asked the man who sent him. When there was no answer, he nodded to his men. The next sound made Lena flinch and cover her mouth. Lorenzo turned, eyes catching her shadow from above. "Go back to your room," he said quietly, not shouting, not angry, just certain she would obey. But she didn't. She whispered, trembling, "Who was that?" He walked toward her slowly, the distance between them shrinking until his presence filled the space like heat. "Someone who thought they could hurt you," he said. "They won't again." For the first time, she saw something behind his calm. Something raw, dangerous, maybe even human. She didn't know if it was protectiveness or possession, but it terrified her all the same. She told him she couldn't live like this, surrounded by violence, by men with guns, by secrets that made her sick. He just looked at her, silent, then said, "You think the world out there is better? At least here, you know who's holding the knife." She turned away, tears stinging her eyes. He called her name softly. "Lena, I never meant for you to see this." She didn't answer. She walked back to her room, locked the door, and cried until morning. By dawn, she made her choice. She was leaving, not because she thought she could escape him, but because she couldn't keep living under his shadow. She packed what little she had, slipped through the back gate when the guards changed shifts, and ran. Her feet burned, her lungs screamed, but she didn't stop until she reached the edge of the city. She found an old motel, paid cash, and collapsed on the bed. When she woke, there was a phone on the nightstand. Not hers. A new one. No note. Just one message. "You're safe. Don't come back." Her stomach dropped. He knew exactly where she was. She stared at the phone for hours, torn between relief and fury. He was watching her even now. That night, she turned on the TV. The news broke with a story that made her blood run cold. Businessman Lorenzo DeSantis under investigation for multiple criminal charges after anonymous evidence leak. Her hand shook as she raised the volume. Photos flashed across the screen. His house, his cars, his men being led away in cuffs. It was surreal. It couldn't be real. But then she saw it. A still image of him being escorted into a black van, expression unreadable. She didn't breathe for what felt like minutes. Someone had betrayed him. Maybe one of his men. Maybe the same ones he'd trusted to protect her. But deep down, she knew the envelope, the dinners, the surveillance. It had all been part of something bigger, something that was always going to collapse. She whispered to herself, "It's over." But it wasn't. Not yet. 2 nights later, a knock came at her motel door. She froze. Every instinct screamed to run, but she opened it slowly. A young woman stood there, barely 20, shaking, holding a flash drive in her hand. She said Lorenzo sent her, that he wanted Lena to have it. Before Lena could ask why, the girl pressed it into her palm and disappeared into the night. Inside the drive were files, names, transactions, recordings. Everything the police had now. And at the end, one single video labeled for Lena. She hesitated before pressing play. Lorenzo appeared on screen, sitting in his study, the same one she'd eaten dinner in weeks ago. His voice was calm, tired but steady. "If you're watching this, it means they finally got what they wanted. And maybe I got what I deserved. But I want you to know something. I didn't save you because I wanted control. I saved you because I saw something in you I lost in myself a long time ago. Freedom." He paused, eyes heavy. "Don't waste it like I did." The screen went black. Lena sat there in silence, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know if she felt pity or closure. Maybe both. She left the drive on the bed, packed her bag, and walked out into the night. For the first time in months, she felt light. The air smelled different. Clean. Free. She found work again weeks later, in a cafe near the station where everything had begun. Sometimes she'd see black cars pass by and feel her heart spike, but they never stopped. Sometimes she'd dream of him, his voice, his control, his strange, fractured kind of kindness. But every time, she woke up and reminded herself that she survived. One evening, just before closing, a small envelope arrived at the counter. No name, just her initials. Inside was a single note. "You did well. Keep going." She smiled faintly, folded it, and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't know if he wrote it before his arrest, or if someone was still out there watching her. But she didn't care. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the shadows anymore. She walked outside, the city alive around her. Every sound, every face, every light reminded her she was free. The past was behind her now, and whatever came next, she'd face it on her own terms. She turned toward the train station, the same one where everything had begun, the same place she'd once tried to run away from everything. Only now, she wasn't running. She was ready. Lena's journey shows that sometimes freedom comes at the cost of everything you thought you needed. Power, protection, even love. None of it matters if it cages your soul. If this story had your heart racing, smash that subscribe button now. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, share to someone who'd love this fire, and stay tuned. Our next story will blow your mind.